So we're going to go over some of the functions of this specific machine for in-house troubleshooting and for service on the field. As you can see on the screen, we have a variation of presets and settings that this machine is capable of doing with two separate hinge locations for a 3.5 hinge and a 4-inch hinge. If you look on the top row here on the presets, you guys will notice that there's a preset for 3.5 hinge for a 6.8, 7.0, and then an 8.0, and then underneath it's going to have a 4-inch hinge for a 6.8, 7.0, and 8.0. The reason why this is laid out how it is because this customer, specifically for Carter, they have a 3.5 hinge locations specifically for a 3.5 hinge, and then for a 4-inch hinge they have a separate set of hinge locations for that specific hinge. So we set the machine to be capable of doing those two separate hinge locations. So with this up here and going into the setup screen, as you can see, it's not going to be your typical calibration for the lock location. On the first column, typically you'll have your 6.8, 7.0, and 8.0, but as you look here, it's actually 6.8, 7.0, 3.5 hinge, then 6.8, 7.0, 4-inch hinge. And then the bottom, that's still the same, you'll have your 8.0 lock location calibration. That's the biggest difference on the screen that when you're troubleshooting to be aware of when you're calibrating, that matches the screen to what they're doing on the machine. So now we're going to take a look real quick on the machine and the labeling on the index stops, hard stops, and the door stops. They're all labeled according to the customer specs and also according to the screen, so everything matches. And we're just going to go over right now the labeling, and then afterwards we'll go over the screen and how it matches to the machine. First, for a right-hand door, as you can see on the labels, that door stop serves for all three door lengths, but also has the function for both a 3.5 hinge and a 4-inch hinge. The difference between both door hinges is a quarter difference. So as you can see at this setup where we have currently in the right-hand side, we label it as a 6.8, 7.0, and 8.0 door. When it's to the left side, it's a 3.5 hinge function, and when it's on the right-hand side, it's going to be a 4-inch function. And as you see on the left-hand side, it's going to be laid out a little more different. Over here, normally you would see that typically on a regular machine, you'll have this door stop for your 6.8, 7.0, and 8.0 right here. But for this specific customer and the way they want things laid out on the machine, it has a separate function now. So now this will be considered your 6.8, 7.0 door hinge location for 3.5 hinge. And then this door stop that typically for 7.0 is going to be considered to be now a 6.8, 7.0 door or a 4-inch hinge. And then if you go over here, now this still continues to be an 8.0 door stop, but on the right hand side will be a 3.5 hinge, but on the left hand side will be a 4-inch hinge. So now we'll go over underneath the stops for the H blocks and their function. So if you look now, typically your index stop located on your right hand side here on head 2 is your 6.8 door stop, hard stop, and then top here would have been your 7.0, and then over here on the left hand side that would have been considered your 8.0, and it still continues in this machine. But now if you look at your labels though, we separate them and designated them to a specific location for the difference between the 3.5 hinge and a 4-inch hinge. So if you look over here, we label now the index stop to be your 6.8 and 7.0 stop for 3.5 hinge, and then the top one now is a 6.8, 7.0 4-inch hinge. On the left hand side, that continues to be your 8.0, but it also goes off for the 3.5 and 4-inch hinges locations for the customer as well. Now we're going to demonstrate the movement of the machine after hitting the preset on the screen. So if you hit the 3.5 hinge for a 6.8 door, and now I'm going to hit the 7.0 preset, but you'll notice that the hits won't move because they're all going off of the same location for the H blocks. All you're doing is changing the lock location different. But if you hit your 3.5 hinge for your 8.0 door stop preset, then your hits will move to the 8.0 location. And here is the layout of this specific customer for Carter Lumber with this option.